In this video, I'll be testing two extremely interesting dashcams, a powerful 3-channel 4K flagship and its budget-friendly sibling. But where can I do this in winter? I'll turn this depressing, gloomy atmosphere into something better in a moment. After all, nobody wants to watch another boring dashcam test done in a dull grey setting, but rather an interesting test in a completely different, extreme location. That sounds way better, especially since the Petronas Twin Towers are right behind me. That can only mean one thing: we're in Malaysia. Welcome to this tropical climate where monitor lizards, cobras, venomous spiders the size of a small dog, and even pythons rule. It's hot and humid here all year round. In these conditions, electronics designed for Europe often fail very quickly because inside the car the temperature can reach up to 70 degrees Celsius. And since I have a brand new flagship T800 with dual 4K here and the more budget-friendly T400, we're in for something really interesting. If they survive these extreme temperatures and that terrible humidity, they'll handle a Polish summer with ease. This is Pavel and you're watching the Tech Maniac HD channel. Welcome. But before we stick the equipment to the windows and hit the road, let me take you on a brief flashback because getting to this equatorial oven was quite an adventure, escaping from cold Ireland. A quick glance at business class and then we land in my seat in economy. The first stop, Istanbul, is an absolutely gigantic airport with over 80 million passengers passing through it every year. A quick transfer to a much bigger plane, a test of the controls, and we're on our way. We've been traveling for 8 hours and we have another 12 hours in the air ahead of us. It's the perfect moment for some onboard gaming and enjoying the beautiful sunrise above the clouds. And finally, we've landed in Malaysia with a view of endless palm forests. Since we had a lot of luggage with us, my fiance's sister picked us up from the airport. The Toyota Velfire is a massive, luxurious van that you simply won't see on Polish roads. Just look at all that space. This particular car may be a bit old, but then again, not really. One thing is certain: comfort never gets old. A sunroof, a delicious coffee in hand, and an interior that's incredibly quiet, soft and comfortable. Perfect conditions to catch your breath after a journey. As you can see, we're at the house. Here we have a few cars to choose from. One is a red hatchback and the other is a black hatchback. However, I decided that the best option would be to choose this Nissan right here. The installation itself is extremely simple and, most importantly, safe for the window, because the manufacturer includes these special electrostatic stickers in the set. I won't be surprised if some of you now ask, where is the classic suction cup? This might surprise you, but this solution isn't worse, it's actually much better. Why? Because you can't cheat physics. Even the best rubber in a suction cup, under the influence of sunlight and heat, it loses its grip, and on cold, damp Polish days it hardens and, well, also loses its grip. The camera often ends up on the dashboard, sometimes while you're driving. A few years ago I bought an expensive suction cup camera. I struggled to mount it and didn't like it. I assumed the high price meant quality, but that wasn't true, right? As you can see, it seems clever, but I can't even count how many times this junk fell off. 70mi has been making cameras for a while now, and using the electrostatic sticker system is just simply better. Of course, before we stick them on, we need to clean the surface of any moisture, dust, or any kind of grease. Only then do we remove the protective film and carefully, smoothing it out, attach it to the glass. It doesn't have any glue on it, it sticks thanks to electrostatic charges. Only then do we peel off the protective layer from the 3M foam tape and stick the camera onto this film. As a result, the mount holds rock solid at any temperature. And when you want to sell the car, you just lift the film and remove the camera, and there isn't even a gram of glue left on the glass. It's clean, secure, and safe. The manufacturer has also considered the scenario of changing cars. In the box, you'll find a spare set, an extra electrostatic film, and new 3M adhesive strips. Of course, you can buy this separately, but it's a nice detail that saves you from searching through auctions, paying for shipping, and spending, as I checked, even several dozen zlotys for the original. And now, with everything stuck on, you need to hide the cables, which requires a bit more maneuvering. In both boxes, you'll find a durable plastic spatula that makes it easier to push the cable under the upholstery or seals. However, we're not installing these cameras permanently, because as you saw, my fiance's dad's car already has a camera, and it's also from 70mi. Actually, as it turns out, everyone in the family uses cameras from 70mi. I have to admit, hand on heart, I had no idea about this, but no matter how you look at it, it's a pleasant surprise. On the other hand, in the back, because there's no rear view mirror or electronics, we have plenty of free space and a huge sheet of glass. In our case, just stick on the film, put the camera somewhere near the center, and that's it. Definitely the simplest stage of the whole operation. The issue of cables is also important. The power cable is 3.5 meters long, which is more than enough, while the cable for the rear camera measures 5 meters. And here, a note. In the Nissan, it was just barely enough. But only because instead of running it under the headliner, we routed it through the trunk and along the bottom of the door, running it up top. Even in a large SUV, you'll still have some slack left. It's also worth knowing that the rear camera cable for the T400 model is thin, so it's easy and convenient to hide it in the gaps. But the one from the T800 set is twice as thick. On one hand, that's great. After all, it's a premium product and transmitting 4K images requires proper cabling. Such a solid cable will really be hard to cut or accidentally sever. On the other hand, it's much harder to tuck such a thick cable under the door seals. Well, you win some, you lose some. Now let's move on to the temperature and this incredible humidity, because that's the main reason for our test. In such a distant, equatorial climate, a car parked in full sun in Malaysia is like a steam capsule, right? Everyone in the family is happy with their older 70mm cameras, but these new models, especially the T800, finally offer dual 4K, simultaneously recording 3 image sources with the H.265 codec would heat up more than one computer. Testing the new models under these conditions is therefore highly desirable. I'll also add that many dashcams you might have considered buying are still equipped with regular lithium-ion batteries, and unfortunately, those hate high temperatures. As we know, Poland can also turn into an oven in the summer. In such conditions, batteries not only degrade extremely quickly, but they can also swell up and in extreme cases, stop working for good. That's why both the flagship T800 and the affordable T400 already use supercapacitors. What difference does that make? Well, unlike batteries, a capacitor doesn't store energy for long hours. Its purpose is to maintain power only for the time needed to save the last clip and safely shut down the device after the engine is turned off. Thanks to this, there's no chemicals inside that could swell, cause a short circuit and damage the device or maybe even the car. The technology used in both tested devices is resistant to extremely high temperatures as well as extremely low ones, from deep frost to tropical heat. To answer any questions in advance, I want to clarify right away that the parking mode is definitely included and it works, but we'll talk about it later in this video. We're heading out for some shopping, and while we're out, I'll share more about both cameras' technical specs. The front camera of the T400 model records in 1440p at 30 frames per second. Meanwhile, the rear lens and the one facing the interior of the car both record in reliable 1080p, which is full HD. This is very important and a big plus in this price range. The interior camera is supported not by 1, but by 4 infrared LEDs, so even if the cabin is pitch dark, you and your passengers are perfectly visible. And now the beast of this review, the T800 model. Now, this is important. This is the first 3-channel dashcam in history that offers dual 4K recording. That's right, both the front and rear are recorded in 3840 by 2160 pixels, while the internal camera records in full HD and is also equipped with 4 infrared LEDs. However, I have to reveal a certain technical nuance to you here. The main T800 module itself can record at 60 frames per second in the front, which gives you super smooth footage. However, in our most advanced variant, where we force the processor to record powerful 4K footage simultaneously from the front and the rear, the system automatically drops the recording to 30 frames per second. And if we compare them now, we can see that the rear camera of the T800 model is incomparably larger and much heavier compared to the small and lightweight module from the T400. This is the physical proof of how much advanced electronics and better glass are needed to handle such powerful 4K footage. The T400 model next to it is a discreet little device that's easy to hide on the windshield, while the T800 is a solid, substantial piece of premium equipment. However, we're going to throw our dashcams right into the heart of a giant, 10 million strong metropolis like Kuala Lumpur. Let's start with something lighter. We're heading out on a quieter route. It's a perfect, stable environment where not much is happening, which allows us to take a closer look at how the sensors themselves work and discuss important technical nuances of both devices. Let's look at this first comparison. On the left is the T400 model, and on the right is the flagship T800 with the 4K label. I need to address an important issue right away. Many of you, especially those into video, may notice that the image from the T800 is a bit too sharp, even unnatural. This is what's called over-sharpening. We don't like this in cinema, but in a dashcam it's a key advantage. The software intentionally enhances the outlines so that license plates are easier to read. The T400 seems softer in comparison, and although for many people this softer image might be more pleasant to look at, for evidentiary purposes, a clearer image will simply be better. However, the real gap between them shows up when the road scene gets even a little more high contrast. Take a look at this segment. The flagship T800 with its advanced HDR simply does a brilliant job. Pay attention to the mountains in the background, the roadside, as well as the road in the shade of the trees. In the recording on the right side, it's not just a black spot. You can clearly see outlines, structure, and details, whereas in the footage from the T400, the shadows are deeper and the details on the dark background simply disappear. And now, a specific argument in favor of the sensor. For greater detail, take a look at this truck parked on the roadside and the road worker. While in the general wide shot, the T400 model with its 1430p still performs great and accurately. For example, it reproduces the bright color of the vest. Yes, but with such a strong zoom on the license plates or the worker, the 4K resolution of the T800 model makes a noticeable difference. In such situations, more pixels really do come in handy. Of course, everything depends on the situation on the road, but the higher resolution of the flagship can actually save your skin one day. Alright, next clip, next scene. Take a look now at that bright greenhouse on the left. This shot perfectly shows the difference in image rendering. On the T400, the colors are a bit washed out and the blacks, look at those structural elements, turn gray. Meanwhile, on the T800 on the right, the image is incredibly saturated and the blacks are deep and rich. Also, watch the bushes beneath the palm trees on the right side of the road. On the cheaper model, HDR, that is high dynamic range, can't handle it and we just get a dark spot there. While the flagship lets us see individual details in the shadows better, this is why such a fast exposure change matters. Not to spy on monkeys between the palm trees, but because you never know what might be lurking in the shadows. This is a recording from the highway leading to Kuala Lumpur, when we enter the deep shadow under the overpass. We observe that the T400 model handles this task really well and smoothly, but the flagship T800 totally crushes it. Before the car even physically got under the bridge, the software of the more expensive model had already managed to boost the brightness and bring out the details from the shadow. It may seem like it's not a huge difference, but on the road it can be crucial. When driving in full sunlight, our eyes often can't see what's lurking in deep shadow, like a brick or any other object lying on the road. Going over such an obstacle at highway speed, we might not even see what it was, and the object itself may be impossible to find afterward. That's why it's so important for our dashcam to be able to show us what it was and where it was. Only with such evidence can we do anything with the insurance company or the road administrator. Kuala Lumpur is a huge city with 10 million people. This wide stretch of road is a perfect test not only for the resolution itself, but above all for the field of view and the sharpness of the lenses at the edges of the frame. Now you can see that both cameras collect all this information without any problem. The T800's flagship 4K camera gives us a razor-sharp image across the entire width. But pay special attention to the budget T400 despite recording fewer pixels. There's no blur at the sides here. You'll easily read directions and signs from all 6 lanes, but the fact remains, what 70mi calls a flagship really deserves that title. See what happens when we zoom in closely on those same signs. There's just no mercy here. Due to its powerful detail and much lower image compression, the T800 model is unbeatable. The letters are smooth and perfectly readable, while on the cheaper model, we can already start to see individual pixels. This is an image so good that it leaves almost every other dashcam on the market behind, but the front windshield is only half the story. The rear cameras are just as important in the urban jungle. Driving in Kuala Lumpur means constantly maneuvering between two-wheelers. Take a look at this part, on the right side. A motorcyclist overtakes us by just a few centimeters, and it's exactly at the moment when we're changing lanes to the right. A moment later, another scooter cuts in front of us from the left side. The front camera recorded it perfectly, but if there had been a scrape here, the insurance company would want to know where they even came from. That's why we check the footage from the rear window, and here you'll probably notice one thing right away. The image from both cameras doesn't have the same angle and framing. So before we move on to those scooters, I need to pause here for a moment and talk about something that I consider a clear drawback. The lens of the rear camera in the T800 model rotates in its housing with far too little resistance. What's worse, the power cable itself has an angled plug, so even a gentle pull on the cable can accidentally shift the frame. In this regard, the budget T400 model performs much better. Its mount has a lot of resistance, it's super solid, and there's no way the camera would just turn on its own. But getting back to our road situation, aside from this slightly shifted frame, just look at how crucial this footage is. It's from the rear camera that we find out how fast those two-wheelers were approaching us and how they were weaving between other cars. And who actually provoked the dangerous situation before they even appeared in the front windshield's field of view. The conclusion is that a good rear view is absolutely essential. And if, while watching such recordings, you're wondering why the image itself doesn't look so perfect and is rather soft, let me explain right away. The blame for this lies with the tinting films in Malaysia, where people are really fed up with the sun. And that's all year round. They are used everywhere. Almost every vehicle here has tinting films applied on the inside of the rear and side windows, and some people even put them on the front windshield. In our Nissan, the rear is also heavily tinted. Such film drastically softens the image and changes its characteristics, which simply has to be taken into account when evaluating this footage. As you probably noticed right away, in this shot the frame is from the flagship T. It's still not perfect. I adjusted it quickly in a traffic jam, so it's still pointing a bit too much upwards, but at least it's no longer recording just the sky. But let's leave this physical flaw aside. It's definitely worth taking a closer look at how both of these modules perform in urban conditions. First of all, you can clearly see that the camera in the T800 set captures a wider image. Secondly, pay attention to the colors. Of course, the colors are heavily ruined by that unfortunate darkening film on the window, but despite this obstacle, the sophisticated Sony sensor in the more expensive model performs phenomenally, delivering high-quality images with much more vibrant colors. Just look at that pink Toyota GT86 drift car. However, you have to remember that the image from the flagship T800 is incomparably smoother, cleaner, and simply more pleasant to the eye. And now, since we've already checked how both cameras perform in full sunlight, it's time to make things a bit more difficult for them. This time, we got caught in a light rain. The cloudy sky causes the contrast in the frame of many cheap dashcams to drop drastically. So let's check how our duo will handle these conditions. Wet asphalt is a nightmare for many cheap dashcams. It acts like a mirror reflecting lights, and the cloudy sky causes the contrast in the frame to drop drastically. However, see how the T800 model's technology handles this. The powerful StarWiz 2 sensors work here with the proprietary MyColor Vivid Plus solution system, which does an excellent job of balancing the exposure. Even in such grey weather and with raindrops hitting the Nissan's windows, the image from both cameras remains very clear, at least as long as the window is wiped by the wipers. The license plates of oncoming cars are clear. You can see this system at work in all conditions. When the exposure changes, you can see it very well, for example here, when we drive into the shade of the trees, and you can notice how smoothly the saturation of the sky changes. Alright, but how does the budget T400 perform in the same conditions? Even though we don't have flagship sensors here, the 1440p resolution up front is more than enough. The image doesn't lose detail, the colors are still natural, and the camera doesn't get confused by water on the windshield. This proves that this device, which costs just a fraction of the price of a flagship, still does its job reliably. Staying on the topic of our rainy drive, it's the perfect moment to take a look inside the cabin. We were just giving a ride to our friend who was kind enough to agree to let us use this recording for Polish YouTube. It would be really nice if at least some of you thanked her. Leave a comment with the hashtag #Wincy Dziękuję. She'll definitely appreciate how cool the Polish community can be. She's even planning to come to Poland for vacation, and your comments will only give her more motivation. As you can see, I moved to the back, sat in the middle of the bench that's raised compared to the front seats, and yet you can still see me clearly in the frame, almost entirely. Here, you just need to keep in mind one thing. On the window, we have a real Christmas tree of 3 cameras. No normal person puts equipment this close to the driver and the mirror. Looking at it from another angle, it's a perfect test and proof that even if you install the camera in the dumbest, most obstructed spot on the windshield, the footage from the internal lens can still easily be used as evidence. To quickly finish discussing the interior, what happens after dark? As I mentioned, both cameras, the flagship T800 and the budget T400, have 4 built-in infrared LEDs each. In practice, this means that even when it's pitch dark inside the cabin and outside, the image from inside is perfectly illuminated. But let's get back outside before it gets completely dark. We caught the tail end of the so-called golden hour, which was slowly turning into evening dusk. I plan to show you a brutal fight with the low sun shining straight into the lens here, but the conditions turned out differently. You know what? I don't regret it at all, because what the cameras captured shows an absolute gap between these two devices. See for yourself in this comparison, the difference in contrast, dynamic range, and color saturation is just huge. I don't know exactly what kind of magic the 70mm software working with a top-notch sensor pulled off here, but the image from the T800 looks like it was taken straight from a professional DSLR, not from some car camera. Here we have deep, rich colors, an amazingly saturated sky shifting from blue to orange, and perfectly balanced exposure. But what about our budget T400? When we compare it directly with the flagship, the image becomes noticeably flatter, washed of color, and lacking in contrast. There's absolutely not the same cinematic magic here, but let's be honest and remember one thing: this is still a dashcam, not equipment for shooting feature films. The white balance stays within normal limits here. All the cars, lights, and details at the intersection are still clear enough in case of any incident. This footage will fully serve its purpose as evidence. The flagship. It simply gives you that extra amazing satisfaction from just watching these recordings. At this point, it's worth bringing up one more key issue: the width of the frame itself. Look at the left side of the screen, where the Porsche Taycan appears. By pausing the image at the same moment, you can see clearly that the flagship T800 captures a much wider portion of the road. Let's quickly test by zooming in on the license plate. The other plate is from this electric car. On the budget T400 we can read these numbers, but the quality is already right on the edge. Meanwhile, on the T800, thanks to powerful 4K and better optics, the same license plate is much clearer. But if we rewind both recordings, you'll see something even more important. Because the flagship has a wider field of view, it can capture vehicles and situations that would already be outside the cheaper model's field of view. In case of a sudden dangerous situation on the road, for example, if something suddenly enters from the roadside or there's a side impact, those extra fractions of a second and the wider field of view can make all the difference. But that's still just a warm-up. The real battle begins after sunset, when the sensors and software come into play, pulling details out of the darkness. But instead of testing this in the bright, well-lit center of Kuala Lumpur, we did it in historic Malacca, specifically in the narrow streets around the famous Jonker Street. Take a look at this comparison. It's immediately noticeable. The budget T400 captures a much more contrasty image at night. But pay attention, because something extremely interesting and unexpected is happening here. Paradoxically, the cheaper model pulled out more details from the deep shadows. Look at the left side of the frame. In the T400, the darkness is clearly brightened. I suspect the difference comes from very aggressive image processing in this cheaper model. While during the day, with changing lighting, I definitely preferred the more expensive T800, and it clearly outclassed its cheaper brother at night. This powerful boost in detail, brightness, and contrast in the T400 can be a pleasant surprise, but this software interference with the image comes at a price. The cheaper model suffers from severe overprocessing. Look at the brake lights of the cars in front of us on the T400. The glare is so strong that the red almost spills across the screen. Meanwhile, the flagship T800 behaves much more gracefully, offering a noticeably more accurate, sharp, perfectly controlled, and natural image. One thing is certain though, hardware-wise, the T800 model is definitely much more advanced. It has a superior sensor, a brighter lens, and can physically capture more light. The advantage of the T400 in those darkest areas you just saw is largely the result of that aggressive and already highly refined software. I wouldn't be surprised if in future software updates, 70mm slightly increased the brightness in the Vlogger to fully utilize its hardware potential. However, one thing must be honestly admitted. Despite the visible noise and blown-out highlights, the footage from the budget T400 is actually very good. It's incredibly clear, and in the event of any collision, it will fully serve its purpose as undeniable evidence. We're now on the outskirts of Malacca. It's much darker, but we still have streetlights, and I have to admit, The budget T400 model is still doing a great job here. Of course, the image is overly saturated and a bit unnatural, just like we said earlier, but this recording is simply incredibly solid. However, the situation changes dramatically when we pass the last streetlights and total darkness falls. In such conditions, you can clearly see the advantage of the more expensive T800 model, which, thanks to better optics, naturally captures much more light from the surroundings. Also, pay attention to one extremely important technical detail: the white balance in these dark conditions. The cheaper model's software can't handle it. The camera renders everything with a yellow tint, while the flagship T800 handles it brilliantly. The color temperature of our car's lights is correct, closer to pure white at around 6000 Kelvin, and the yellow reflective light on the warning sign about the curve is, well, simply properly yellow. To further prove to you why equipment matters here, let's zoom in on the center of the frame, right onto the car in front of us. Maybe that aggressive software in the cheaper one is doing its best to pull something out here, but in the recording from the flagship T800 we can see much more. In short, on a completely dark road, the more expensive model simply shows its class. If I often traveled in such conditions myself, the T800 is the device I would install in my car without a moment's hesitation. Darkness is one thing, but bright sunlight can be just as problematic for the lens. So let's smoothly transition back to the daytime footage, because I deliberately saved a certain ace up my sleeve for this moment. I have this unassuming glass ring here. It's a polarizing filter, or CPL, which you have to buy separately. The good news is that this particular filter fits both the lens on the flagship T800 and the lens on the smaller T400. But is it even worth doing, and what does it actually do? Let's start with a brief explanation. The manufacturer provided me with only one such filter for testing, so to make the comparison between the more expensive and the cheaper model completely fair during all previous tests. It stayed in the glove compartment. I didn't want to favor any device or artificially improve its recordings. This gadget works like polarized glasses, and its main task is to reduce reflections. Here's an example from a quick neighborhood drive. In the left image, the car mount reflects in the window, a common recording nuisance. On the right, the reflections are gone. With the filter on, the reflection almost completely disappears, and the sky gets a deeper blue. When driving towards the sun, the contrast and colors are just much better. Is it really that big of a difference? Well, the filter definitely does something, and it's not a gimmick. You'll probably notice the biggest difference in bright sunlight after it rains. Wet asphalt can glare like a mirror, but I didn't manage to catch that moment during normal driving on a sunny day. The image is clearly better too, but not everything that glitters is gold. There's one small thing. But depending on which side the sun is shining from, with the ring attached, sometimes a rainbow effect appears in the recording. It might be beautiful and romantic, but let's be honest, nobody needs that on footage from a dashcam. However, you can see that just turning towards the sun makes this effect disappear immediately. In the end, I think this gadget will help you more than it will hurt you. So if you drive a lot, get annoyed by seeing your own dashboard in the frame, and you're putting together your set, it's definitely worth adding it. I promise to come back to the topic of power supply while parked. Since we have supercapacitors here, which by design don't hold a charge for hours, how does parked car protection actually work? What's necessary here is the so-called hardware kit, which is a dedicated power adapter. There are tons of these adapters on auction sites, but it's definitely best to choose the original one from 70.my. Why? Because not only does it have built-in protection against battery discharge, but it also fully integrates with the manufacturer's ecosystem, allowing you to monitor the voltage directly from the app. What's more, the software allows you to set the recording time in parking mode from 2 to 24 hours after the engine is turned off. Taking it a step further, the T800 model allows you to connect a power adapter with a 4G module, and yes, you heard that right. Thanks to the SIM card, you can remotely view the live camera feed from anywhere, as well as check the battery voltage level. The app will automatically send you a notification on your phone if it detects an impact. Unfortunately, I didn't have that adapter during the tests, so I can't show you how it works. Still, I think you'll agree it's a brilliant feature in theory. The link to it will of course be in the description. Fortunately, the parking mode itself is not just ordinary standby. First of all, the T800 model has motion detection supported by artificial intelligence. If this algorithm determines that someone suspicious is lingering too close to your car, the camera starts a 30-second recording immediately from all 3 lenses. The next feature is a classic shock sensor. If someone hits your car in a supermarket parking lot, the device immediately detects it and securely saves the recording. What's important is that the flagship model uses 70 mi LumiVision technology. Simply put, even if you park in the darkest corner of an underground garage, the incident footage should be bright enough. It's worth emphasizing one thing here. Both of these modes are very gentle on your car's battery. And finally, there's the third option, which is time-lapse. In everyday terms, time-lapse recording means the camera captures the surroundings non-stop, but it only takes 1 frame per second. As a result, 15 minutes of parking turns into just 1 minute of edited footage. Thanks to this, you can leave your car overnight, and in the morning, only a fraction of the memory card will be used. Even though you had continuous recording from all 3 cameras, you just need to remember that this mode doesn't put the camera to sleep, so it puts more strain on the vehicle's battery. Maybe I didn't have that dedicated adapter, but since we went to the local market anyway, I left the cameras plugged into a power bank to check how this full protection works in real-world conditions.
Even during a quick shopping trip, the car can get scratched or something like that. So let's see right away.
We spent about 15 to 20 minutes in the store. We bought some kind of Karcher. Let's see what was recorded during that time. To be honest, from the moment we parked and got out of the car to the moment we came back, absolutely nothing happened here. Here you can only see the recording quality of the T400 model in full sunlight in the parking lot. For me, the image is totally sharp. However, we're changing the location. We drove to another shopping center to get something to eat as well, and we parked. As you can see, it's pretty tight in a place like this. There are a lot of cars. It's true that cars only drive from one side, but I suppose that leaving the cameras here will be a good test. I'll show you in a moment how it looks from the front and the back. Here you can see that the ring is lit up green. On the T800 the screen is also on, but that's only because it's running on a power bank. Normally the parking mode would turn it off. It's all to save energy and not attract unnecessary attention. You can even see less when I look inside during the day. The image from the front T800 camera is outstanding in quality. You can clearly see every vehicle and the faces of pedestrians. The pedestrian signs located a dozen or so meters away are perfectly readable at the back. It would probably be the same if it weren't for the previously mentioned fact of the applied film and the sun shining directly into the lens. Nevertheless, if a car were to scratch us while passing another parked vehicle, it wouldn't go unnoticed. The license plate, make, and model are fully readable. But things get more interesting when the sun starts to set and the parking lot gets darker and darker. We're coming back from shopping. It's already dusk, around 3:20 p.m. You can see the sunset behind me, if you can see anything at all. We bought all sorts of strange things, and now we'll check the camera footage to see if anything happened. I don't want to say that something happened because I'm sure it didn't, knock on wood. But we'll also see what the recordings look like in these conditions, when it's getting a bit dark, almost dusk. We can see that the recording from the back, without direct light hitting the sensor, looks much better now. On the other hand, the front camera, even in these conditions when we're losing natural light, maintains great quality and smoothly adjusts the exposure. It would be no problem to record people moving around the car or the license plate of a vehicle that accidentally bumps into us. This little experiment proved that full protection with the T800 is not just an empty advertising slogan. You know well that on this channel there's no nonsense, and I do the tests as thoroughly as possible. That's why so many of you subscribe and leave a thumbs up here, for which I'm really grateful. And as part of these tests, we're heading after dark to the famous Junkers Street night market. We leave the car in a spot that may not be particularly shady, but it's definitely tight and squeezed in, right in the heart of the old crowded tourist center. Oh, and by the way, just take a look at this shot from the front camera. At sunset, it looks absolutely amazing, just like in Miami. Now that we've managed to park safely, let's check out the Junkers Street night market. This part of the city is incredibly old and steeped in history. At one time it was actually under Dutch rule, and today it's the absolute heart of Asian culture, full of life, especially after dark. Here you can try amazing grilled octopus, and if you're looking for souvenirs, the prices are just ridiculously low. Just look at these magnets. Each one costs only 3 ringgit, which is about 2.5 zloty. I'll be honest with you, Malaysia is really worth visiting when it comes to infrastructure and organization. It's a much more developed, I would even dare to say, a more civilized country than Vietnam, Thailand, or Indonesia. Of course, it's not yet at the level of Singapore, but it's much cheaper here and just really nice. We came to Malaysia to visit my fiance's family, but our trip has a much broader context. If you're curious how it happened that we're ultimately moving here from Ireland, you'll find a whole series of vlogs about it on the channel. I warmly invite you to check it out. The link to the playlist is in the description and in the pinned comment right below the links to both cameras we tested. But let's get back to the topic. As expected, the traffic in this parking lot was definitely heavier than at our previous test locations. Fortunately, nothing hit us, but if it had, we would have caught the culprit red-handed, and in 4K, just take a look at this shot. Someone in that red car really struggled with parking, but eventually gave up and parked across the way. Meanwhile, the driver of this Toyota Vios parked without any problem. You can see on the front camera how they're reversing, but what's more interesting is that our internal lens also captures everything clearly. Take a look. You can even see in the recording how the passenger slowly and carefully opens the door. However, if someone got careless and slammed their door into the side of our car, this kind of shot from inside the cabin becomes solid evidence. And what's happening on the rear camera? People are slowly strolling, enjoying the beautiful, pleasantly cool 25-degree evening. Here, a couple is rummaging through a backpack, taking something out, moving something around. In short, full 360-degree surveillance, of course, in the positive sense, protecting our car. So, as you can see for yourselves, both models perform excellently. Despite leaving the car in full sunlight multiple times and coming back after several hours when it was really hot inside, the dash cams turned on without any problem. Yes, the cases felt really hot to the touch, but even in such extreme tropical conditions, none of the tested units got damaged. It didn't overheat, didn't reset, and didn't cause any other strange problems. It passed the durability test with flying colors. So, hardware-wise, it's great, but what about the app? Here, both models work with the dedicated 70My app. Downloading recordings via Wi-Fi or live preview works really well. Of course, the live preview doesn't have full quality, but the downloaded file does. I'll just briefly mention that the T800 model also has the ADAS system on board. It warns you, among other things, about lane departure, collision risk, detects pedestrians, or lets you know that the car in front of you in a traffic jam has just started moving. However, since the camera then generates additional sounds and beeping, it is turned off by default. Some of you will probably want to use this feature, and that's fine. On a long trip it might come in handy, but many drivers will simply find it too annoying. However, for those interested, the feature is of course available. Let me add a quick note about voice commands. Both models support them, and although there's no Polish language option, basically all you need is to know one basic command in English. Saying the words record video immediately sends the current recording to a digital vault that stores road incidents. Thanks to this, we secure the file and it won't be overwritten when the memory card runs out of space. It's a simple but very useful solution in a stressful situation. So, was it worth carrying this equipment to the other side of the world? I think it definitely was. Since these cameras didn't overheat in the Malaysian oven, they'll handle absolutely anything in Poland. If you click the link below, you'll see for yourself that the T400 model currently costs just a few hundred zlotys. Considering the quality this device delivers across all three lenses, it's a fantastic choice that performs really well. On the other hand, the flagship T800 is for those who simply want the best. To make this set truly pro and get the absolute maximum out of the technology, it's definitely worth buying the 4G module for remote viewing, which I mentioned earlier. You can find links to the most common offers, the polarizing filter, and the power supply in the description. And for my travel vlogs, check out my website. On the screen, click on them, and I'll see you right away in the next video.